11 through 183. If you haven't already, please go to uhuranews.com to download a copy of the political report and the study questions for more information. We will take your live calls with questions and comments to the chairman later in the show. With no further delay, here is the author of the political report, the leader of the African People's Socialist Party and African Socialist International, Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Today's discussion of the political report to the 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party is part of a process mandated by the Constitution of our party. I am required by the party's Constitution to provide members of the party a political report to be discussed and critiqued at least 3 months prior to our Congress. Today's study is simply one of the many ways this paper will be examined during the 3-month period allotted for discussion. This is not only a means of advancing the democratic principles of the party, it is also a means by which the level of political and ideological development of the party is promoted and enhanced. The party's constitution calls for pre-Congress regional meetings to occur throughout the U.S. and the African world, where the political report can be discussed, resolutions can be advanced, and regional leaders be selected for ratification at the Congress. Our inexperience and, in some cases, ineptitude will affect our ability to make these regional meetings happen in an optimal manner, and there will be some adjustments in how they will occur relative to our actual capacity. We welcome all of you who have decided to participate in this study today. I would remind you that this is a study, and that while we invite and welcome participation and contributions, this is not a forum for serious polemics and opposition to the document or the theory of the party. I know there will be some temptation by some individuals and organizations to initiate fierce ideological struggles with the conclusions put forth in this document. That is understandable. The political report challenges many of the assumptions that have informed the practice or lack thereof of militants for more than 100 years in some cases. However, this process is designed to facilitate the 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. It is a document designed to inform practice, to contribute to changing the world. We agree that for the proletariat, the working masses of the world, knowledge of the world is only important if it contributes to our ability to change the world. We are not barbershop philosophers, and we are not interested in promoting information consumptions for its own sake. For those who do find the content and or essence of this report so reprehensible that it demands a comprehensive response, we welcome it. This is one of the purposes of the political report. We call on you to use Uhuru News to make your views known, and we will attempt to respond to them in the course of time in a manner that will not interrupt the work to build the 6th Congress of the party. Most of the members of our party are workers or politically inexperienced without the benefit of revolutionary political and theoretical development, or they have been under assault of posers who have occupied much of the political space since the defeat of the revolution, of the Black Revolution of the 60s. One objective of the African People's Socialist Party in this process is the creation of revolutionary working class intellectuals that will be equipped with the necessary practice-based theory to lead our party in the struggle for national liberation under the leadership of the international African working class. This political report was written in a manner to contribute to this development. This study is concerned with facilitating that process. As you know, and has been mentioned, there's a study guide that also accompanies this discussion that we'll be having today. Nevertheless, I am going to intervene by making some statements about what can be found in the political report that we're going to be looking at today, or that section that we're going to be looking at today. The study guide is something that we've done to promote discussion by those of you who are participating in this study. We think it's important for you to participate as well, so that it's not just a matter of me disseminating information or putting forth the views of the political report, but nevertheless, it's a long study that we have today. The 2 chapters of 4 and 5 are extremely long, and I do feel a responsibility to point out some of the things that contained in the two chapters we're going to be looking at. In chapter 4, we deal with the question of the nation. And here we say we are helping to understand that the issue of the nation is being thrust upon the world by the crisis of imperialism, as clearly demonstrated by the musings and of quoted and cited leading thinkers of the white ruling class. So this thing about the crisis of imperialism is not just some invention, but it's also something that's being discussed and put forward by some of the leading thinking representatives of the white ruling class itself. The shifting center of economic and political gravity in the world challenges the self-definition of whites or Europeans and their relationship to the world and themselves. Africans and others are also being forced by the depth and intensity of the crisis of imperialism to give greater, scientifically based definition of our reality. The definition of the nation has always been met with some ambiguity. This is true within the African liberation movement as well as a broad spectrum of European intellectuals. We mention here that the influence of Stalin's definition of the nation as a historically constituted, stable community of people formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifested in a common culture, was based on Stalin's leadership of much of the international communist movement from 1924 to 1953. So Stalin was extraordinarily influential in terms of the definition of the nation. Many people who call themselves progressives or involved in the struggle, who entertain what is characterized as a national question when it has to do with African people, have been influenced by Stalin and his definition. We challenge that. The major problem we found with all the definitions of the nation was the inability of any of them to explain the historical basis of the nation as a European phenomenon. We show how the European bourgeoisie and workers were born of the same process, giving rise to the European nation. The rise of the nation was the means by which the capitalist ruling class and state would secure the loyalty of the working class with material interests perceived to be the same because of the significance of the nation as apparent to both. That is to say, as apparent to both the ruling class and the working class. And then a quote speaking to that is, the European nation derives from relations of production contained within capitalism that was spawned by slavery and colonialism. It was born as a parasitic capitalist or bourgeois nation, and its sense of sameness, self-perception, subjective expression necessarily for binding the emergent white ruling class to its newly forged bourgeoisie is white and Christian. The materialist basis of the European nation is the parasitic capitalist system that bore it in Europe, the land to which it is historically attached. The capitalist system feeds the entire European nation through its cannibalistic, parasitic relationship to Africa and most of the world. We say further that the arrival of the European nation on the historical scene was in response to the need in Europe for the emancipation of the European workers to facilitate the emergence and development of capitalism as a parasitic infestation on the body of humanity. Its function was to serve the development of Europe. Its consequence was an attack on the development and survival of much of the world. And then further, the European nation became the means of securing the loyalty of the emancipated laborer to the emergent capitalist state and by association ruling class. Now it is not the feudal state or sheriff of Nottingham that forces the toilers to fight the wars of the ruling class or put the interests of the state above their own. It is the flag, the national anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance, the collective identification with a common history, real and or imagined, national holidays and ceremonies, etc., that facilitate the new relations of production necessary for capitalist production relations of production resting on a parasitic economic foundation whose genesis is colonial slavery. And then further, that the problem for the European nation is that it did result from a false, self-serving European definition of the African. Since this false definition was the basis upon which the sense of white sameness necessary for the definition of the European nation is anchored, the ability of the African to successfully achieve self-definition marks the beginning of the need of a crucial subjective factor, beginning of the end of a need for a crucial subjective factor necessary for the European national coherence. In other words, what we're saying is that the problem with it, one fundamental problem of the European nation, is that it results from a false and self-serving European definition of the African. It is a reflection of this definition of the African that it created. And since this false definition was the basis upon which the sense of white sameness necessary for its definition is anchored. It is the basis of the sense of, part of the basis of the sense of white sameness that defines the white nation is anchored to its definition of who it says black people are. So we says that to the extent that African people ourselves successfully achieve self-definition, then this marks the beginning of the end of a crucial subjective factor given definition to the white nation. I hope I'm clear on that. The African nation is also real, and it too must rest upon a material basis that serves as a function of African development. Like the European nation, the emergent African nation is a response to necessity. We are facing the historical requirements for advancing and developing Africa and African people whose generally oppressive conditions of existence derive from the stuff resulting in the emergence of the European or so-called white bourgeois or capitalist nation. The work of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League was the clearest practical and organizational manifestation of the aspiration of African people worldwide to achieve national unification under one flag. An array of left opponents of Garvey that included the NAACP, other Negro socialist organizations, and the Communist Party USA joined with the U.S. government and other imperialists in becoming opponents of African self-determination in the form of national consolidation. The most vociferous of these opponents was the Communist Party USA and one of its main spokespersons, George Padmore, whose book, The Life and Struggles of Negro Toilers, represented a vitriolic attack on Garvey as the enemy of African working people worldwide. However, shorn of his subjective rantings, we show that Padmore's book actually provided the empirical data that validated most of the assumptions of Garvey's work predicated on one Africa, one nation.